Sometimes you gotta play the role of the fool, to fool the fool who thinks they're fooling you. And in a world full of people who wear masks so convincingly, sometimes the most dangerous weapon is silence, patience, and a quiet understanding of the game that's being played. There are people who thrive on deception, who take pleasure in manipulating others, who see kindness as weakness and empathy as a flaw. These people are often the most broken ones, hiding behind charm and carefully crafted personas, pretending to care while secretly calculating their next move. But what they never expect, what they can't prepare for, is the person who's already seen through the illusion. The person who watches, who waits, who listens carefully and plays along, not out of ignorance, but out of strategy. When you're aware of the manipulation, but choose not to react, you strip the manipulator of their power. Because the moment you stop giving them the reactions they crave, they begin to unravel. They don't know what to do with someone who doesn't play into their trap. They expect you to get emotional, to chase, to beg, to break. But when you don't, when you stay still in your knowing, they start to question their grip. They become desperate, confused, because they thought they were in control, but all along they were just performing in a show you already had the script for. You let them think they were winning, because sometimes that's the smartest thing to do. Let them talk, let them lie, let them underestimate you, because a person who underestimates you will always expose themselves faster than someone who knows you're a threat. And while they think you're weak, soft, or clueless, you're actually documenting everything. Every inconsistency, every subtle manipulation, every backhanded comment, every breadcrumb, every moment they tried to twist your words or make you question your reality. You don't confront them too early. You don't reveal your hand too soon. You let them feel safe in their illusion, because that's when they get sloppy. That's when the mask begins to slip, and by the time they realize they were never fooling you, it's too late. You've already decided your exit. You've already chosen your freedom. And nothing breaks a manipulator more than realizing the power they thought they had over you was an illusion of their own making. They never controlled you. They were simply playing in a game you allowed, until you no longer did. Manipulators depend on your confusion. They rely on you second-guessing yourself, questioning your reality, and constantly trying to make sense of their unpredictable behavior. They feed off your emotional reactions like parasites feeding on chaos. But the most powerful shift happens when you stop reacting and start observing. When you stop explaining yourself to someone committed to misunderstanding you. When you stop pouring energy into decoding someone who thrives on being vague. That's the moment everything begins to shift. Because the game they thought they were winning begins to fall apart, not with a loud explosion, but with quiet disinterest. You no longer take the bait. You stop trying to prove your love. You stop trying to defend yourself against the lies they plant. You simply watch, not out of fear, not out of submission, but out of strategy. You let them reveal everything, because the truth always exposes itself. The person who plays dirty will eventually trip on their own lies, and you, patient, silent, and clear, will be there to witness it all, not with anger, but with certainty. See, people who manipulate often have one fatal flaw. They believe they're smarter than everyone else. They think they can play the same game forever, that their charm will always work, that they'll always get away with it. But what they never account for is the moment someone stops engaging, the moment someone starts thinking for themselves. And when you reach that point, when your eyes open and you realize your worth, everything changes. You don't need revenge. You don't need drama. You don't need to prove anything. Because the greatest revenge is moving on with dignity, living well, glowing in silence, healing loudly. Because while they're still trying to pull the strings, you've already walked off the stage. You've already cut the cords. And that's when they panic. That's when they try to come back. Not because they love you, but because they miss the control. But this time the door's not just closed, it's locked. Because you learned that people who love to play games never expect to get played. They assume you'll always be available, that you'll always be forgiving, that you'll stay no matter how many times they hurt you. But the moment you choose yourself, really choose yourself, you become untouchable. You become the player they never saw coming. The one who let them talk, let them lie, let them play, until they played themselves. And all you had to do was watch. There's an art to knowing when to speak, and when to stay silent. And sometimes silence is your sharpest weapon. It's not the silence of fear or weakness. It's the silence of someone who knows their value. It's the calm of a person who's been pushed, tested, lied to, and still chose not to break, but to rise. See, manipulators hate silence. They hate when you don't fight back, when you don't beg, when you don't cry the way you used to. They hate when you start responding with grace instead of chaos, when you choose to disengage rather than argue. That silence eats away at them, because for the first time, they no longer control your emotions. You're not giving them the power to shape your mood, to dictate your reactions, to own your peace, and that terrifies them, because they can't manipulate what doesn't react. They can't twist silence into something it's not. They can't win against someone who refuses to play. That's when the real panic sets in, when they realize you're not just angry, you're done explaining, done trying, done caring. That's when your silence becomes louder than all the words you ever shouted, and in that stillness, you reclaim something priceless, your power, because now you're not just surviving, you're watching them unravel, watching the lies collapse, watching the story they tried to control fall apart under the weight of their own ego. You become the observer, the quiet storm they never saw coming, and while they scramble to regain control, to manipulate again, to press your buttons, they find nothing, just your calm, your clarity, your indifference. And nothing makes a manipulator lose faster than indifference, because they crave attention, chaos, drama. And when you stop giving them any of it, they lose their grip, completely. You are no longer in their web, you're not caught, you're not confused. You see them clearly now, and you see yourself even clearer. And in that clarity, you choose peace over war, growth over drama, freedom over control. That's the win, that's the real revenge. Not shouting, not fighting, just walking away so silently. They'll hear your absence echo louder than your presence ever did, and they'll realize too late that the fool they thought they were playing was playing them all along. Letting go doesn't always come with fireworks. Sometimes it comes in the quiet hours of the night, when your heart has finally grown tired of breaking in the same place. It's not a dramatic goodbye. It's not screaming through tears or begging to be understood. It's waking up one morning and realizing that you've outgrown the pain, that you no longer feel the need to fix what someone else keeps breaking, that you no longer want to carry the weight of someone who only ever brought confusion and hurt. That's when you know you've started to heal, not when you stop loving them, but when you start loving yourself more. See, people think detachment is cold, heartless, unfeeling, but the truth is, detachment is strength. It's self-protection after you've been drained dry. It's choosing to no longer bleed for someone who wouldn't even offer you a bandage. Detachment doesn't mean you didn't care. It means you cared too much for too long, and now your heart needs peace more than it needs promises. Because when you've been manipulated, when you've been lied to, gaslit, twisted into a version of yourself that doesn't even recognize her own reflection, detachment becomes survival. It becomes a quiet rebellion against every time you were told you were overreacting, every time your tears were met with coldness, every time you were made to feel like your pain was too much, your voice too loud, your needs too inconvenient. You start to realize that the only person who can truly protect your heart is you, and so you build boundaries, not walls, but doors with locks. You no longer let people walk in and out as they please. You choose who stays, you decide who's worthy. And that's the most powerful shift of all. When you go from begging to be chosen to choosing yourself. When you go from needing validation to knowing your worth. When you go from giving your all to someone who gave you crumbs, to giving everything to your own healing. That's not weakness. That's a revolution. That's a woman who's no longer afraid to walk alone, because she knows solitude is better than settling. That's a woman who doesn't need closure, because the truth was always loud enough. That's a woman who doesn't chase anymore, because what's meant for her will never require betrayal, confusion or pain. She's not angry, she's not bitter, she's just done. And that kind of peace, that kind of silence, it roars louder than any scream ever could. There comes a point when the pattern becomes too familiar. The same conversations that lead nowhere, the same apologies that feel more like rehearsed scripts than real remorse, the same manipulation dressed up as misunderstandings. At first you give the benefit of the doubt, because your heart is soft, because you believe in growth, because you're human, and love makes you hopeful. But hope can only stretch so far before it snaps. And when it does, something inside you wakes up, not in a loud way, not in a storm of rage or a night of tears. It's more subtle, more permanent. It's the moment you look at the person you once fought so hard to keep and realize they were never really fighting for you. They were fighting to keep you confused, tethered, emotionally invested, but never safe. They didn't love you, they loved the power they had over you. They loved your vulnerability, not because they cherished it, but because they could use it against you. And when you see that truth, when it hits you like a quiet lightning bolt, it changes everything. Suddenly, you stop justifying the red flags. You stop rewriting your own memory to make room for their excuses. You stop believing that their love was ever love at all, and that realization doesn't break you, it sets you free. Because now the spell is broken. You no longer hang on to the good moments, hoping they'll come back. You realize those moments were always bait, designed to keep you trapped. You realize that love doesn't come with conditions. It doesn't make you feel small. It doesn't punish you for speaking up. It doesn't disappear when you need it most. Love doesn't play games with your heart and call it miscommunication. Love doesn't make you feel like you're too much. The right love makes you feel seen, safe, understood. And if it doesn't do that, it's not love. It's control. So you stop giving pieces of yourself to someone who only shows up when it's convenient. You stop explaining your worth to someone committed to misunderstanding it. And you start pouring that energy back into yourself, into your healing, into the life you want to build without them, into the version of you that you lost trying to please someone who never deserved you in the first place. And that decision, no matter how hard, is the beginning of your power. It's the start of your comeback. Because now you're no longer waiting for them to change. You're changing everything by walking away. And that's the moment they lose all control, because they thought you needed them to be whole. But now they see you were whole all along. You just forgot. And now you're remembering. Healing isn't a straight line. It's messy, complicated, and often lonely. But once you decide to stop bleeding for someone who wouldn't even hand you a bandage, everything begins to shift. You start seeing your pain not as a weakness, but as a badge of survival. You stop viewing your tears as shameful, and begin honoring them as proof that your heart loved deeply, even if it was for someone who didn't deserve it. The nights that broke you become the same nights that build your strength. You start learning to sit with your silence, and hear your own voice again. Not the voice that was silenced by manipulation, not the voice that was twisted into guilt or shame, but your real voice. The one that knows who she is, what she deserves, and what she will never tolerate again. You begin setting boundaries, not as a punishment to others, but as a commitment to yourself. And the more you honor those boundaries, the more you rebuild the woman they tried to destroy. You stop looking for closure from the person who broke you, and instead you find it in your own growth. In your laughter coming back, in your sleep feeling peaceful again. In the way your energy shifts when you no longer shrink in someone else's presence. You stop explaining your absence to people who never checked on you while you were hurting. You stop responding to people who only reach out when they want access, not connection. Because healing teaches you that not everyone deserves a seat at your table, especially those who tried to flip it over. And with every step forward, you take your power back. You stop needing revenge, because your success is louder than any scream. Your healing becomes the closure they'll never get. And when they realize they can no longer trigger you, no longer get a reaction, no longer confuse you, they lose the grip they once had. You become unshakable. Not because you've forgotten what they did, but because you've risen so far above it, they can't touch you anymore. You forgive, not for them, but for you. Because you're too powerful to carry their poison, too healed to hold their shame. And as you walk into this next chapter, you no longer carry the weight of their lies, or the burden of their chaos. You walk in light, you walk with peace, and you walk knowing that your silence, your distance, your glow, that's the loudest message of all. You were never the fool. You were the lesson, and now that they've lost you, that's a price they'll never stop paying. There is something profoundly unsettling to a manipulator, when the person they once toyed with no longer reacts, because reaction is their fuel. They thrive on the chaos, on the drama, on the emotional spirals they trigger. When you cry, beg, defend yourself, or try to make them see your side, they feed on it. It keeps them in control. It keeps you in a loop. But when you evolve past the need to explain yourself to someone who has no intention of understanding you, everything changes. You stop giving them ammunition. You stop handing them pieces of your heart for them to twist. You go silent, but it's not empty silence. It's full of power, of wisdom, of observation. Because now you see the patterns so clearly. You see the lies before they leave their lips. You notice the tone shifts, the gaslighting, the manipulation tactics they use when they feel you slipping. And rather than fight back, you detach. You no longer feel the need to win them over. Your peace becomes more valuable than their approval. Your growth becomes louder than their guilt trips. You start to notice that you are no longer the person who needed answers. You've become the one who holds them. Because here's the truth. The person who stays calm in chaos holds all the power. The person who doesn't react is the one who is in control, not of others, but of themselves. And in a world of people who try to dominate through fear, silence is rebellion. You don't play their game because you've outgrown it. You've stepped into a higher level of awareness, where manipulation has no place, where your spirit no longer dances for crumbs of love, where your worth is no longer tied to someone else's ability to treat you right. You've taken back your energy. You've reclaimed your story. And now you're not just surviving. You're mastering the art of emotional strategy. And that kind of wisdom, that kind of silence, it can't be touched. It can't be manipulated, because now you know the rules, and you refuse to play by them. There's a moment in every emotionally intelligent woman's journey, when she finally stops arguing, not because she's given up, but because she's woken up. She realizes that her peace is worth more than being right in a conversation designed to confuse her. When someone twists her words, plays victim, or deflects the issue, she no longer takes the bait. She sees the pattern for what it is, a trap. A cycle, a method of keeping her stuck in a place where love is conditional, accountability is optional, and emotional manipulation is normalized. And in that realization, she changes her response. Instead of defending herself to someone who isn't listening, she saves her breath. Instead of explaining her feelings to someone who mocks them, she validates herself. Instead of waiting for empathy from someone incapable of offering it, she gives herself the compassion she always craved. And the most dangerous thing for a manipulator, a woman who no longer needs them to feel whole. See, when you're still emotionally attached, they can control you. They can lure you back in with half-hearted apologies, hollow promises, or temporary kindness. But once you've detached, not even their best performance can reach you. You don't fall for the "I miss you" texts. You don't melt at their tears. You've seen behind the mask, and now you know what's real. You no longer confuse intensity for intimacy. You no longer mistake chaos for passion. You've learned that love isn't supposed to hurt, confuse, or make you question your reality. And so your silence becomes your power. Your distance becomes your boundary. Your healing becomes your revenge. Not because you want to hurt them, but because you've finally chosen to stop hurting yourself. You no longer wait for them to change. You change the game by walking away. And that decision, it terrifies them. Because manipulators expect reaction. They expect access. They expect control. But when you give them nothing, no attention, no emotion, no explanation, you take everything. You rob them of the one thing they can't stand to lose: power. And in doing so you rise. Not bitter, not broken, but unshakable. Because once a woman knows her worth, she can never be played the same way again. There is a profound shift that happens when you no longer rely on someone else's validation to feel whole. It's the moment you stop waiting for the apology that may never come. The moment you realize that your worth was never tied to their ability to recognize it. And in that moment, a weight lifts off your shoulders. You don't need them to change. You don't need them to see the error of their ways. You don't need them to say, "I'm sorry." What you need is to forgive yourself for ever thinking you weren't enough. You need to forgive yourself for staying in a situation where you weren't valued. You need to forgive yourself for accepting crumbs when you were worthy of a feast. That's the first step in healing. Realizing that your love was never the problem. Their inability to see it, respect it, or appreciate it, that's where the problem lay. And once you come to terms with that, the real healing begins. You stop feeling angry. Not because you've forgiven them, but because you've released the emotional attachment to their behavior. You stop replaying the moments in your head. You stop wishing things had been different, because deep down you know that if they were capable of treating you right, they would have. And the truth is, their failure to love you the way you deserved isn't a reflection of you. It's a reflection of them. And once you understand that, the power shifts back into your hands. You stop seeing their actions as personal attacks. You stop looking for closure from someone who never cared enough to give it to you. Instead, you close the chapter yourself. You write your own ending. And that's when you realize the best revenge is not proving them wrong. It's proving yourself right. It's showing yourself that you are worthy of love, respect, and kindness. It's proving that you are capable of healing, of moving on, of thriving without them. And as you step into your own light, they'll see that their manipulation no longer holds any power over you. They'll see that you were never the fool in the game. You were simply playing by a different set of rules, the rules of self-respect, self-love, and self-liberation. And the greatest revenge of all, living a life they'll never be able to touch, a life filled with peace, purpose, and the kind of love that you give to yourself first. There's a powerful kind of quiet that comes when you stop trying to prove your worth to people who will never see it. It's not a silence born from fear or insecurity. It's a silence forged in strength and wisdom. The kind of silence that speaks louder than any words ever could. It's the silence of a woman who has learned that she doesn't need to justify her worth to anyone. The silence of someone who no longer cares for validation, not because she's given up on love, but because she knows her own love is enough. The silence of a person who stopped begging for attention, for affection, for consistency, because now she gives it to herself. And in this silence, a world of clarity opens up. She no longer needs to be heard by those who refuse to listen. She doesn't need to be understood by people who only want to manipulate her emotions. Instead, she listens to herself. She listens to her heart, to her soul, to the inner voice that's been quieted for too long. She starts making decisions that honor her own needs, her own desires, her own dreams. She stops caring about the past and starts focusing on the present and the future, the life she's building for herself, not for someone else's approval. The moment you realize your worth isn't determined by how others treat you, everything shifts. You stop chasing love because you understand that love doesn't need to be chased. It's not about seeking approval or constantly proving you're worth loving. The love you give to yourself is the greatest foundation for anything else. It's the love that builds your confidence, your happiness, your inner peace. And when you realize this, you stop wasting your energy on people who don't appreciate it. You stop fighting to stay in relationships that drain you. You stop accepting less than you deserve, because you now know your worth. And that's the kind of shift that scares manipulators, because once you stop reacting, once you stop seeking their approval, they lose all control. They no longer have the power to dictate your emotions, to make you question your value, to pull you back into their toxic cycle. You've broken free from the need to play their games, and in doing so you've won. You've reclaimed your peace, your power, and your self-respect. And in that moment you realize that you were never truly broken. You were just waiting for the moment when you'd stop trying to fix something that was never yours to fix. You were waiting for the moment when you'd realize you were always enough. When you finally stop seeking validation from people who are incapable of giving it to you, something profound shifts inside. It's not just the release of their emotional hold over you, it's the birth of your emotional sovereignty. It's when you look in the mirror and see a woman who no longer depends on external approval to feel worthy. She doesn't need to hear you're beautiful from someone who's never meant it. She doesn't need someone else to tell her she's enough, because she already knows it. She knows her worth. And that knowledge is more powerful than any compliment, any praise, or any affirmation from someone else. It's the moment she stops waiting for someone to see her value, and starts living as though she knows she's worthy, whether anyone else does or not. The beauty in this transformation is that it's not about becoming someone different. It's about realizing who you've always been. It's about peeling away the layers of self-doubt, insecurity, and emotional dependence that you've been conditioned to wear. You stop believing the lies that were fed to you, lies that said you had to earn love or prove your worth. You stop measuring your value by how others treat you, and start measuring it by how you treat yourself. You begin to make choices that are in alignment with your highest good, not in response to the demands or manipulations of others. And in this space you realize the truth. You never needed to prove yourself to anyone. You've always been enough. The moment you stop chasing validation, you start creating a life that's based on your own standards. You don't settle for the bare minimum, because you now understand that you deserve the very best, not just from others, but from yourself. You stop tolerating disrespect, dishonesty, and emotional games, because you've realized you no longer need to play in that arena. And here's where the magic happens. The moment you stop looking for validation, people start noticing. They notice your strength. They notice your confidence. They notice the peace you carry. And when they realize they no longer have control over your emotions, they begin to scramble. They'll try to draw you back into their drama. They'll try to play the same games, to get you to react. But by now you're untouchable. Because you've reclaimed your emotional power. You've made peace with your past, with the things that hurt you, with the people who tried to break you. And in doing so, you've become the woman they never expected. You've become someone who knows her worth, someone who no longer asks for love, but attracts it, because she already knows she's deserving. In the end, the greatest gift you can give yourself is the freedom to stop fighting for someone else's affection, approval, or attention. The moment you realize that your peace, your self-respect, and your joy are worth more than the chaos of trying to please someone who will never value you for who you are, everything changes. You stop living for their love. You stop seeking their approval. You stop measuring your worth by their inconsistent actions. You stop waiting for them to apologize for their behavior, to recognize your sacrifice, or to love you the way you've always deserved. And the moment you let go of all of that, you discover a freedom that most people never experience. You become free not just from them, but from the emotional chains you've been wearing. You let go of the need to explain yourself to anyone who's never truly listened. You let go of the toxic patterns you once accepted as normal. You let go of the idea that you need someone else to make you whole. Instead, you become whole on your own. You start to realize that true love doesn't need to be begged for. True love doesn't need to be earned. It doesn't require manipulation, lies, or emotional games. True love starts with self-love. It's the quiet, unshakable, knowing that you are worthy of the very best, and that the best doesn't come with strings attached, doesn't come with conditions, doesn't come with emotional manipulation. When you stop accepting less than you deserve, you open the door to receiving more than you ever imagined. You begin to build a life that's yours and yours alone, based on your own desires, your own values, your own standards. And what's more powerful than a woman who no longer needs to prove herself? Nothing rattles a manipulator more than a woman who is finally free of their grip, because they know the game is over. They know you've seen through their lies. They know you've stopped playing their game. And when they realize they can no longer control you, they are forced to face the truth. The only person they were ever fooling was themselves. And in the end, the one who was truly blind to your worth was never you, it was them. So, walk away with your head held high. Walk away with your heart intact. Walk away knowing that the greatest revenge isn't anger, bitterness, or regret. It's healing. It's moving on. It's living a life that's no longer shaped by someone else's lies. Because you've learned the most important lesson of all: you were never the fool. The only fool in this game was the one who thought they could control you. And in the silence of your strength, they'll finally understand that.